going on, ladies and gents? I'm Teeter's black boyfriend, the Black Stallion,
I'm Marcy.
and we are the Watchers of the Basement. We are doing episode 10, season 5 of Yellowstone. Welcome back, our second week back from this our hiatus for the last 2 years. So thank you so much for joining us. Marcy, I was late to the
Mm.
party. I watched it today, episode 10. And I got a text from you last night saying that the opening up part of the episode is gonna just scare the Jesus out of you, essentially, and it did. It did. So let's get into it, man. Let's talk about the opening scene of this episode and what was your thoughts on it and the symbolism behind it.
Yeah, it was great. So it starts off, the cowboys are getting ready for their day. It's probably very early. Sun definitely hasn't risen yet. It's still dark. So they've got gators just kind of getting their breakfast ready in the chuck wagon. They're getting ready, getting dressed. You see all of them come out, greet Gator, get in line for breakfast. We don't see Teeter. So, Rip has to say, hey, has anybody seen Teeter? He opens her tent and she is frozen with fear, streaming, like sweat is just kind of all over her face. It's a rattlesnake sitting on top of her chest. When I first saw her, I thought maybe she'd been bitten by the rattlesnake and that's why she was sweating profusely, and it was just kind of the effects of the venom. Like, oh no, not Teeter, don't let anything happen to her. But luckily she was fine, just scared out of her mind, and Rip and the rest of the cowboys were able to save the day. But they realized that they were camped on top of just like a pit of rattlesnakes that were everywhere. They had taken over some old prairie dog holes and tunnels in the ground. So that was a great way to start the episode and great way to symbolize not only what's been happening this season, right? Just snakes everywhere. You don't know where is safe because you're surrounded by snakes. So not only this episode is, very symbolic of that, but just kind of Yellowstone overall. You never know who to trust. Yeah, it was a big rattlesnake too. Hi, Texas Potterhead. You don't know who to trust. You're surrounded by snakes, and how you get rid of them is to cut the head off. So does this mean that John Dutton was ahead and like his head's been cut off? So now like the rattlesnake of the Dutton family is immobilized, or, are there other snakes that we need to chop their heads off? Frank, what did you think about the opening scene?
I mean, you hit it right on the head. I think the symbolism was grand and very gargantuan throughout this episode about the symbolism of what John meant to not only his kids, but like to the ranch, right? Like he is the de facto leader of the whole operation, the whole shebang and bang. So that the rattlesnakes theme for me was so symbolic of what you just said, of him being the head of everything. And now that he's gone, how do the rest of the ranch and everybody a part of the ranch pick up the pieces? It's funny, like when I saw that scene with Teeter, and I thought like you, I thought she had already been bitten and she was just kind of like in paralysis or something. In my head, I was thinking to myself, man, please don't tell me Teeter has a coffee company too, and like Taylor is suing her too, and I he just sign her, write her off the storyline. Like the only woman in the bunkhouse. Come on, bro, like that's cold blooded. But I'm glad she's okay. It's one of those things where we're still seeing the result of the collapse of what's going on with the Dutton family. In episode 1, you saw symbolism of like life after ranching and what life could be after ranching, and Rip talking about it, and some of the bunkhouse mates talking about it, of like, what do they do now? With technology coming in and like things evolving, and you get more of it today in this episode from last night. Rip made a point to a special character that we had thought about and talked about last week, and he said a line about John Deere, the ever evolving of evolution when it comes to like not staying in the past and being lost. He made a great point about John Deere were wagons back in the day in the 1800s. That's how they made their money, and the visionary of John Deere. He saw where things were going once engines were invented, and how John Deere wagons to tractors, and even to this day they're selling tractors. And Rip made that example of like how they have to evolve now of this living and cattle ranching and cowboying with the times. And I think that's what the last two episodes have been more about, outside of John being dead, of how they move on, how do they evolve. But no, I agree. I think the symbolism is real. I think it's going to continue to permeate throughout this season of these next 4 episodes, and it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. Speaking of who Rip was talking to in regards to that John Deere reference, we had a character reappear that I believe Texas Party had brought up last week in our podcast, and that's Summer. Marcy, talk about where Summer's at now and like where things are with her.
Yeah, Summer is back. I was excited to see her because I was hoping that they wouldn't just kind of forget about her and maybe just not bring her back and just kind of not say anything. But we see Summer. She is back at John's house, the lodge. Beth is obviously not happy to see her. You know, they have tense history there. But Summer is just obviously distraught. John has died. She obviously had feelings for him. So now she doesn't know what to do, right? She was under the impression that her release was conditional and she was under house arrest and had to stay there under the kind of care and supervision of John. Well, apparently that wasn't the case, as Beth so crudely pointed out to her. He was maybe just keeping her around to be able to have sex with her or whatever, as Beth liked to put it. So I think Summer was just like very confused. And now again, more of like, where does she go from here? I think she is somebody that just got caught up in the game and just kind of the fight for everything, right? She's in trouble because of the plan that she and Beth hatched. And then Beth just kind of threw her under the bus and let her just kind of be sentenced and go to jail and didn't really care about it. So Summer is back, but she's also gone now. They shipped her off. She got dropped off at the airport, luckily not the train station, by Rip. So we will see if we see Summer again or if she's just kind of flown off into the sunset.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about Summer, only because there has to be more, right? Like I don't think you just have her reappear for this episode just to send her off in the same episode. I feel like and I think with her, you saw throughout this episode of like how John impacted the people that were around him, right? I think Summer being one, Rip and Bev's adopted son being another person, Lord even mentioning about John. This episode really encompassed like the void of like John being gone and like how they move on. And I don't think we'd see the last of Summer. I feel like this death of John is going to affect Summer from the standpoint that she wants to do something about it and help.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much power Summer has, but I know she's been a part of a lot of protests. I know she's fought against a lot of things in her life when it comes to animal rights and environmental rights. I wonder if she uses those same fighting protocols to help the Duttons, fight against market equities and Jamie as well. That's my I guess prediction moving forward. We have a tweet by Texas Pothead. Thanks so much, my lady, for joining us today. She says, "I hope we see Summer later on. Maybe she helps with something environmentally later on and earn Beth's respect." I'm with that as well. I think the harshness of Beth is going to play a part long term. I mean, I know they never got along. One of my favorite episodes of this series is the fight scene that lasted. It seemed like forever in that episode. Rip had to be the voice of reason of all people. But I think Beth's anger, it even predates Summer, right? With Jamie and everything that she's gone through. And I think that anger is going to play a part enclosure as far as like Summer bringing either a peace offering or something that she can bring in a good fight against Jamie. What do you think about that, Marcy?
Yeah, it would be great again to see her again, like Texas Potterhead said, maybe like doing something with the environment now that the conservation easement is going to be scrapped now that John is dead and just kind of everything with the estate is up in the air. And I also, again, agree with Texas Potterhead. I don't think that John was keeping her around for sex, like Beth said. Maybe he was keeping her around again to show her the way of life. I think he probably also felt guilty, right? She was in trouble because of what she tried to do in cahoots with Beth to help the environment. If you're John Dutton, I don't think you need to trick a woman into house arrest to be able to sleep with her. Like, you've got swagger. You are John friggin' Dutton. You don't need to do that. For at first, when we didn't see Summer, I was concerned that maybe she'd gotten executed as well. Maybe just nobody knew about it. Maybe she had gone to the Capitol house to stay with John, and maybe she'd gotten caught up with that, and maybe that's why we hadn't heard about her. But I was glad that she wasn't killed, that she was fine for all intents and purposes, and then she'll live to fight another day against like greedy companies and people that just want to destroy the environment, which will be needed a lot in the future, both everywhere, like Yellowstone universe, but also in real life too.
Let's talk about Beth. In this episode, we see Beth drive like a bat out of hell out of Montana into Texas, which is it's not down the street. That's about a 16, 17, 18-hour drive. It probably maybe longer, but she gets stopped by a state trooper in the Texas, and she's trying to get to her husband, which I thought was weird because like the timeline throws me off because last I remember is that Beth asked Rip to come home in episode 1.
There was a flashback. So this was before John got killed, after she'd finished her community service. So that was still part of the flashback. So John still was alive. And I don't think that was her car because Rip and the Cowboys didn't know who it was. So I'm assuming she flew into maybe Lubbock and then drove the rest of the way. I mean, okay. Beth is she's tough, but I think she would have been like, I'm not driving this whole long way from Montana to the Texas Panhandle.
Okay, that makes sense then. So that seems a flashback still 6 weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and then that's weird how they didn't put like flashback on there, and because like that scene and then the hotel scene all 6 weeks ago, and then the next scene they're in present day in Montana. I'm like, wait, what's going on? Like, they should have put like explanations like this is 6 weeks ago, or this is 5 weeks ago, or pre John Dutton's death or whatever. But
I think they're gonna do that maybe a lot this season, and they relied heavily on flashbacks the first part of this season as well, when we saw like young Rip and young Beth. So yeah, I think a lot of the season will be going back to flashbacks, and then I don't know how much of this season was filmed before they had to go on the hiatus for the writers and actor strikes last summer. So maybe this was all written and maybe some of this was already filmed before the strikes, before Kevin Costner dropped out. So I'm very interested to know like what was written before Kevin Costner decided to leave, what was written after. Did it all have to be scrapped after Kevin Costner left and just kind of like rewritten and reshot? So I'm guessing that may be another reason why we see a lot of flashbacks and a lot of the 4/6's crew as well.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense then. That makes sense because I was so confused by that scene and then the present day scene. But yeah, going back to the state trooper police stop, she gets stopped, and it's kind of like a paying homage to like the 4/6's and what 4/6's means to the state of Texas, especially in that region. She's driving over 100 miles an hour easily, and she gets stopped, and like she prop her breasts up, she hikes the skirt up because she assumes a guy's gonna come, and she talk her way out of a ticket, and it's a woman, a state trooper, and she's like, oh man, I wasn't ready for the high dress and the cleavage, I feel honored, and then she's like ask her where she's going, and then She talks about her husband's in the 4-6s, but she doesn't know exactly where, and she gives the location, and like all of a sudden the officer's face just changes. Like, oh, okay, your husband works in the 4-6s. Like, I salute you. I salute the husband. I salute the hard work that they do, whatever. And Beth asks a question. She's like, why are you saying thank you for what my husband does? And she kind of says, hey, like, cowboy life is not easy, and in this part of the world in Texas, it's very very much appreciated, and it's a dying industry. So for those who are still in it, they pay homage to it. What's your take about that scene in general, between Beth and the police officer?
Yeah, I think it was funny. I think it was great that they just kind of talked about how hard it is to be a cowboy, to kind of put food on the table, whether you're a state trooper and that's how you earn your living and put food on the table that way, or if you are a cattle rancher. I think that's a theme that Yellowstone really likes to drive home, just hard work and just kind of how much respect these professions need. But also, I'm guessing this is also regional because she said kids learn about the 4-6s ranch in school here. And I'm like, not everywhere. Like, you and I grew up in North Texas. So I at least didn't learn about all the Texas ranches. Didn't know what the 4-6s was until I was a grown up. So I'm guessing that may be more of a regional thing, to where if you live in the Panhandle or near where the big cattle ranches still are in Texas, not anywhere near North Texas where I'm from, definitely not. But yeah, that was interesting because I was like, I didn't learn about that.
Yeah, that's definitely something that wasn't in our history books at all. But I think this is Taylor Sheridan doing a good job of like really plugging in 4-6s to prep for this 4-6s show that's coming out next year. Of just continuously plugging it in and just showing like the importance and prominence of that region to prep for, Jimmy and his exploits for the new show. But I think that was super dope, and I was just waiting for Beth to like just go off and snap off. So for Beth to hold it in and like not have a typical Beth smart ass response or rebuttal, I thought showed growth temporarily for Ms. Dutton.
I just don't think she wanted more community service, and maybe she'd heard like you don't want to mess around with the Texas state troopers. So smart, Beth. You definitely don't want to piss the state troopers off.
Absolutely.
Shout out to the Texas state troopers.
Right. And then also, so let's talk more. So Beth gets to the 4-6s, and we get some Beth and Rip time. And I must say, man, look, I love Rip for his violent ways, his kick-ass attitude, but I equally love Rip because of the different sides that Rip shows when he's vulnerable. And one of the few times that he's vulnerable is when, Beth is around, or when John was around and him and John had those deep-hearted talks, or Carter later on in this episode. They've been working very, very hard. They moved all the cattle from Montana to Fort Worth. They're trying to, get all this done. And, Rip doesn't take a day off. Rip's all about the ranch and only about the ranch. He's one of the more loyal, if not the most loyal person on that ranch outside of Lloyd. And to see Beth pretty much say, hey, like, I hear you, you're about the ranch, but fuck all that. We need husband wife time. Like, you've been working 24/7. I can't have you out here 24/7 and not have my quality time. And it's kind of adorable because Rip tries to push back, like, look, you're not supposed to be out here. This is why I didn't want you out here, because this is rugged living and all this kind of stuff. And Beth puts her foot down. She pretty much tells the bunkhouse crew, like, look, I'm taking my husband for 2 days. I'll cut a deal with you. I'll get you hookers. I'll get you girlfriends, boyfriends, whoever want to come to the land, to the settlement. Y'all can have y'all time, but I need my man back for the meantime. And it's so funny that Rip trying to fight back, and like and like the bunkhouse.
You're not gonna win. You're not gonna win.
You're not gonna win. Like, Beth runs the show here. Like, you're not gonna win this. Just give in and just go and have some quality time. But seeing the smile on Rip's face and seeing, him kind of like let down his hair a little bit and show a more human side to him. I think is what makes his character so special, is that he's not just a cold-blooded killer. He's not just a guy that just kicks ass all day, but he does have a sweet side and a soft side to him that I think that makes him more compelling to on screen. In this series. Well, what are your thoughts about Beth and Rip's relationship moving forward, and this episode particularly?
Yeah, it's nice to see, like you said, him just kind of relax a little bit. You don't always have to be all about the ranch and cowboying and taking people to the train station. It's okay to have some happiness, right? To have some moments of levity. And then you're not going to win. Like if Beth wants something, she's going to get it. So, um I think he probably also wanting to protect her and being like, this isn't, you're not going to have fun here. This isn't camp. This is dangerous. Um, I think it probably also meant a lot to him that she traveled down to see him, to spend some time with him, even if it was just 1 or 2 nights. I think that might have felt really good for him to know that maybe he'd been mostly alone all of his life, except for, just kind of Lloyd and the rest of the cowboys and John, but just to know that somebody loves him that much and really wants to be with him that much, it makes me happy to think that Rip is being like, okay, like this is what it feels like, and being able to experience that, because I think it's great when you get to experience that and have that kind of relationship and love. So hopefully it'll continue now that we're after John's death and things are, up in the air and just everybody's on a murderous rampage. Hopefully they'll be able to live there happily ever after they maybe get some revenge.
Texas part of here says that I do see the struggle he has now that John is going with ultimately the ranch, and falling on his shoulders to keep the wheels spinning. And yeah, I mean, I think Rip constantly thrives in pressure, right? But this is a whole new type of pressure that he's never seen before. Like all his life, he had John there as his confidant, somebody to lean on when he needed advice or when he needed, extra tutelage. Now it's like he doesn't have he doesn't have anybody to bounce this stuff off of outside of Lloyd, right? And Lloyd's at the time is way in Montana. Also to go back a little bit too about Beth and Rip's relationship. Beth frustrated me in season 5, and not current timeline Beth, but when you see more of the relationship in season 5, I guess part A of season 5, of how they the up and down nature of their relationship when they were children, and how Beth kind of like tease them, ridicule them, and like mess with other guys in front of him and stuff. So to see the maturation, I'm saying this, the maturation of Beth, the lover, the wife, towards Rip, it doesn't bring me happiness and not frustration anymore, because she's grown so much as a woman. And like you could tell she really loves this man, as opposed to when they were teenagers, it was more so like, this flirtatious, type of woman that was just emotionally distant, emotionally distraught, and cold, and how Rip loved her anyways, no matter what. And to see this full grown come into maturation, how like she not only receives his love but gives it back tenfold towards Rip, it really shows the development for them. And I hope, I pray and hope that it doesn't end in tragedy, because it does look like it's going to be a Shakespearean type of ending for one of them, if not both. What are your thoughts on how this ends in regards of Beth and Rip, and do they make it out in one piece?
I hope they do, because I like what you brought up, just kind of how much she's matured, even if parts of her are still not mature and she picks fights with people she doesn't need to be picking fights with, like Summer, right? Like teenage girls can be assholes in relationship. Coming from somebody who was a teenage girl in relationship, I was an asshole. I'm glad, like, as a grown up, I try to not be an asshole and, be a really loving partner. But like you, I'm hoping that they get some kind of happy ending, but I'm very skeptical, because it does feel like Taylor's setting us up for like some kind of like Shakespearean like ending where like everybody, like all are punished, nobody is happy, and just kind of everybody is just consumed either by greed, Jamie and Sarah Atwood, or consumed by vengeance, whether that's Beth or Casey or Rip. So I'm hoping that we get some kind of happy conclusion for at least someone, but definitely for Beth and Rip, I think that would be nice and hopefully calm Beth down a little bit. And then also for Carter, right? Like he also talked in this episode about like how everybody that I have loved has left me and let me down. Starting with his parents, and now he feels that John did because he's under the impression that he committed suicide. So I don't want it to end in tragedy, partly because I don't want Carter to have to go through that again. And then maybe that impacts his worldview moving forward. I want him to have like a more positive outcome and, grow up and to be a happy adult, right? And maybe have like a happier life than Rip ended up having. Because, yeah, he was able to be protected and work at the ranch. But like Beth said, they were just kind of shackled to the ranch, not really getting to live their lives, but just kind of prisoners of the ranch and the legacy and everything that came with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. In regards to Carter, and how I wish they showed more. And when I say wish, I mean Taylor. I wish he showed more of a connection and responsibility that Rip and Beth have taken Carter in. We haven't really seen much interaction as far as like a parental vibe between Rip, Beth, and Carter. Carter's been on the ranch this whole time, while Beth is like doing Beth things and Rip is in Fort Worth. I mean, Rip's in the 4 6s. There hasn't been much parental type of aura in this this season. And Carter's grown now. Like I would like to see that. Like Carter's an orphan, like how Rip was. And I feel like the writing will be a lot more stronger if you connect the origin stories of Rip and Carter and how they come from similar backgrounds. And I would love to see that fatherly instinct, or fatherly advice or fatherly tutelage that Rip can potentially, convey to Carter. I just feel like the writing has failed Carter in a way to where we don't really see him much. And like season 4, you saw so much of like the struggles that Beth and Rip and Carter had, coming together as a unit, and Beth taking them in, I mean by proxy Rip taking them in, but we haven't seen much of that since then. Oh, and do you think we will in the last 4 episodes, or you think that's the storyline that's just kind of like falling by the wayside? Like what's going on there?
I think we may, just because in this episode you did get a little bit of that with kind of Rip going into the bunkhouse and being like, okay, like, yes, it's okay to like be sad about it, but doesn't mean you need to lay around all day. Like it's not in your job description. Get up. Like trying to like have a little bit of a pep talk with him and just kind of make him feel better. And especially when he says, when Carter says, I wanted to be like him. And, Rip says something to the effect of, a lot of men have tried to do that. And if you are able to do so, you would be the first one to do so. So I think we may get some more of that, but hopefully it won't be overshadowed by just this whole vengeance, I guess, storyline that will probably play out between Rip and Beth and Casey against Jamie and Sarah Atwood and market equities. But I think we might get more of that, just like we're seeing a lot of that with Casey and Tate. I think that's kind of maybe going to be a theme this season of like fathers and father figures now taking over that place, right? Like that used to be John giving like Casey and Beth and everybody just kind of like pep talks and being there for them, being the father figure. I think now Casey and Rip are going to, take that part at the ranch.
Speaking of Casey, let's talk about him for a little bit. I know in the flashback we see Casey, Monica, and Tate. They finalized. They finished pretty much the construction of their new cabin, right? Like so, they're happy. They have their own place. I think Casey mentioned it's the first time that they've had their own place. All the times they either rented or lived with somebody, and there's a sense of proudness from Casey. I hate these flashbacks. I'm gonna tell you why. I don't hate them as far as like they're needed. Don't get me wrong, they're very much needed. I'm not saying they're not good. The reason I don't like them and it frustrates me is that when I watch these flashbacks and these semblances of happiness, whether it's Rip and Beth at the hotel and they're just having a good time, or whether it's, you know, Casey, Monica, and Tate enjoying their home, their first lodge, first cabin for the first time. We as the viewer, we know that this is temporary. We know in the main timeline, John is dead. The ranch is in shambles. People don't know what to do. The Dutton family is struggling. There's so much pain on the other side of that flashback. So watching these flashbacks, it just makes me realize, don't get reeled into this, Frank, because you know this is not what's going on recently. It's like this was happiness 6 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago, pre John's apparent suicide. That's what makes me sad. Is when I watch these flashbacks. But I want to talk about Casey from the standpoint that we know Casey and Jamie will have a final Grand Hall Corral type of meetup, one-on-one face-off pretty soon. And I think I texted you in the group chat today. I was like, man, Mad Casey might be one of the best things we see in 2024 on TV. Because when we watch Casey over the last 5 seasons, early on in Casey's story arc, you see that he's trying to stay away from what he used to be, right? Like they talk about, you know, in the past about his military past, his black ops past, the things that he had to do while he was over there, and how parts of him died out there. And now when he came back to Montana, he's not who he was prior to going overseas, right? And you see that you saw a semblance of a man that is still trying to heal. The wolf premonitions, you know, the prayer that, you know, him and the ritual that him and I can't remember the Native American guy's name. Mo and the head guy, I can't remember his name, but like they had a ritual to cleanse his spirits and his sins from his past. He's a guy who is chasing peace. He's trying to find peace, and he has never had that peace for a long time coming now. And I think this season, you see it coming back to a head again of him having to go back to that part of his life when he doesn't want to go back to. But it kind of reminds me of Wolverine, when Wolverine says, you know, I'm the best at what I do, and what I do is not very nice. I think you might get that with Casey, with the black ops thing, and like him, you know, in the present day time, calling his friend, I think it's Kay McPherson is his name, played by Jack McLaughlin, who was in Quantico and Will Trent. I got excited from the standpoint that we about to see Badass Casey. And last time we saw Badass Casey was when Tate was kidnapped and this motherfucker cleaned house. House on wreck shop on everybody. Something tells me it's going to be 10 times worse than that. Not only his dad is gone, but he's pretty much sure that his dad was killed. And he's calling it Black Op Crew now. Let's talk about that and like where this may lead Casey moving forward.
Mad Casey is something to be reckoned with, I imagine. I mean, he bit his lip so hard that it started bleeding just from finding out from Beth that it was Jamie, right? Like, that's how mad he got. He just bit his lip and it starts bleeding. I think that rage is going to fuel him. But also I think he's probably going to be reckoning with, okay, yes, I need to avenge my father, but also I don't want to lose the family that I have. So I think that might be an inner turmoil for him. And even Monica's recognizing that, right? When she gets back in the truck after they both stopped and, you know, she kind of knew that something was wrong with him. That's when she told Tate, okay, like when he doesn't want to talk, that's when you talk to him. When he wants to be left alone, that's when you stay with him, because she knows what he could end up doing, what he gives into when he goes, into his moods, or, has to turn into badass Casey. She definitely knows that that could threaten their family life. So I think she's aware of it. He's aware of it. Um, but yeah, I think it might be a little bit fun to see as well. Like Black Ops Casey with his Black Ops friends. Like, what kind of damage can they do to Jamie and Sarah and market equities and whoever else wants to get in their way? And like just kind of take point on that, because when we saw Rip and Lloyd talking, they were like, okay, like maybe we need to saddle up for this. But like Rip said, spending the rest of our lives in prison, what's that going to help? So Lloyd and Rip might be taking kind of like a step back and letting Casey,
which
and
is
his
crazy
friends,
to me.
with it.
We saw a episode where Lloyd and Rip, they went to, after Jimmy's father got killed, or Jimmy's uncle got killed, they went and cleaned shop and blew up a damn trailer park. like
Yeah.
or not trailer, but a trailer. And so
Mhm.
that's interesting that Rip and Lloyd have become the voice of reason on this show, which I find very, very interesting, to say
Luckily.
the least.
And that might be partly because of Carter. I think Rip now knows, like, before, when it was just me and I was a single cowboy and I was kind of indebted to John Dutton for taking me in. Yeah, I would have killed for him, and like maybe I get killed, like whatever. Maybe I go to prison, whatever. Like, what do I have to live for? Oh, now I have Beth. Like, that's one really important thing to live for. But also, I have Carter, and that's also a really important thing for me to live for. He's a kid. He also feels like he's been abandoned his whole life. So I think that might be shaping some of his thinking as well. Not that he doesn't want to get revenge or that he doesn't think like it's necessary, but I think he wants to be more strategic than just saddling up and going and shooting up everybody without just kind of taking it into account what the consequences can be.
Yeah, and not just the consequences, but like he said to Lloyd, they don't know who they're fighting. They're still trying to figure that part out. They
Right.
know that they have enemies all around, but they've had enemies since the since the start of the show. But the difference is, in those past issues, they knew who they were fight. They knew who they were
Right.
fighting. So that's gonna be interesting. But to go back to Casey and Kate McPherson's conversation over the phone, Casey asked, have you heard anything of like who could have been hired to like send out this hit? And we get a Houston reference. We get Kay talks about, well, there's a private company that's contracted out of Houston that does a lot of things. They plant evidence, infiltration, you name it, all of that. It hasn't been confirmed yet, but I think Kay referenced that he had just got back from overseas, so he's gonna look into it. But do you think the company that Kate is talking about is the company that kind of worked out the hit to take John out the game?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought about like what the company would be. I wouldn't even know like how to think about hits and things like that. But what was interesting was that he said like it could be a 40 to $50 million hit. That's insane. That's a lot of money. Like, what? So that was my thought when I was watching that scene. I was like, holy crap. But also, like, does Taylor Sheridan not watch true crime shows? Does he not watch Dateline? Because there have been so many cases where it's an apparent suicide, and like detectives figure out that, oh, it wasn't. Like, maybe like this is a very sophisticated hit, and like a regular detective might not. But that doesn't mean that like somebody somewhere isn't going to be like, hey, this doesn't add up. And it's the governor of Montana. So even if it's an apparent suicide, like the medical examiner still has to be involved and, do an autopsy and all of these things. So I'm just kind of like, Taylor, like apparent suicide has been used before and even in real life, and people still get caught. So I'm hoping that that's what happens, right? That like the evidence and the science points to what actually happened. And, it can be like, oh, you guys are so stupid. You paid all this money to like just get caught.
Sorry, I hit my camera on accident. Yeah, that I thought that was kind of weird in itself as well. That influence of writing in regards to the apparent suicide. So Jamie pretty much has gotten confirmation from Beth. Let's talk about how Beth got that confirmation, right? So apparently Jamie comes up, Jamie comes back to the office. You know, his secretary tells him that Beth is in his office, and he's like, "Wait, in my office?" So he goes in his office. Beth is there, and the amount of tension that I felt in my hands, in my chest, of like this is the first time they've seen each other face to face since John's death, and I thought Beth was gonna knock his ass out, like off top. I thought,
She
and
almost did.
yeah,
Knocked
she
him like 3 times.
in the three slaps, and after the first slap, Beth says, "Look at me." He doesn't look. Slap again. Look at me. I want you to look at me. He can't. He's looking at the ground. He's literally looking at the floor. Third slap, and Jamie still doesn't look at her, and he pretty much says, you know, paraphrase, "My face will be the last face you see when it's all said and done." Door open. Secretary's within earshot of what she can hear everything that Beth is saying, and she walks out and then walks back and says, "It will be the last time. This is the last time." And she walks out. Talk about that scene, Marcine, what and the tension that you must have felt watching that.
Yeah, you didn't know what was going to happen. Again, I didn't know she was going to hit him in the face 3 times. Really, Jamie? Like, after the first time, to like back away, to like duck. What are you doing? Jamie is a little shit, like Texas Potterhead said. He's a little bitch too. Like, at least if you're going to have murderous plots, be able to like have a poker face. To be a politician, you have to be able to have a poker face and to lie with a straight face and to look people in the eye and know that you're lying to them. So that is something he needs to work on if he wants to, run for governor in the special election. But it's a classic Beth scene, right? She's going to get up in your face and threaten you and tell you what's going to happen to you. I would say that might be just some really easy foreshadowing. I think that might be what happens. Because, that would just be wonderful justice. And she doesn't give a fuck. Like you said, the door is wide open. His assistant could hear what's going on. She doesn't care. But I like how she was able to hold it together when she was with Jamie and then when she runs into Sarah and Ellis in the hallway. Because then after she walks away from the office, you could see all that tension just kind of leave her body and she's shaking. She's so anxious. She's calling Casey and telling him, it was him. He couldn't look me in the eye. So her ability to hold it together to then like break down, I think was very, very strong. I would not be able to do it. I break down very easily. So that would not be me.
I must say, man, well, we all know Jamie's an idiot. He's not very smart when it comes to like common sense at times and like how he moves. You know your brother's a trained killer, right? You know your brother-in-law is a trained killer. Why to be smarter about it, why not reach out to Jamie? Why not reach out to Rip or other people in the family and say, my condolences, I'm just as broken as you are. I say that to say this, it makes you look more guilty that you had something to do with it because you haven't reached out to anybody in regards of like what happened with John. Like you ain't show up at the ranch, you ain't called nobody, like you just hiding in your office or hiding within your kingdom with market equities. And it just makes you look more guilty of what you've done. I would, because like it kind of loses a little bit that Jamie and Casey were somewhat close, and for Jamie to not reach out to Casey at all, and I'm sure Casey has thought about this too, of like, and that's probably why he's so angry, why he bit his lip. Like it's making sense to me now. I ain't heard from this motherfucker. He ain't come by the crib, like nothing. Like he hasn't done anything to show that he's broken up and hurt too about this apparent suicide. So and even in the first part of season 5 in part A, like Casey is repeatedly standing up for Jamie. He's when Jamie's not around, when Beth wants to talk bad, when John wants to talk bad about Jamie, Casey's always there to back him up, and he's one of the last ones to believe that Jamie is even capable of something like that. So yeah, I that was just my statement about Jamie. I think he's an idiot and how he never even thought to reach out to his own brothers.
I think it is partly because he knows he can't look them in the face knowing what's happened. He's like, I'm going to get found out. But yeah, he is dumb. That does make him look more guilty. I think he's just one of those people that feels shame so deeply that they would just rather avoid the people that you are shamed to be around rather than like be around it, lie to make yourself not look guilty. I think he is so racked with shame that he's like, I can't even face them. Not only because I'm going to give myself away, but because I can't bring myself to face them knowing what I did, especially because I don't really think that he thought it was going to happen, right? I think he was like, this is just pillow talk with Sarah. Maybe it's getting us freaky a little bit. Maybe she's turned on by this. Who knows? But I don't think he really expected them to kill John. Like that was not in his mind. And I think he also wanted maybe to get rid of Beth, not necessarily John, right? Like most of his beef has always been with Beth, right? Like he knows John has been a hard ass on him and like they've fought, but I think deep down inside, he always had some kind of love for John, even though like John didn't feel the same because Jamie is weak. So I think he wanted to get rid of Beth, not necessarily John. And he is maybe trying to figure out what's going to happen now because I didn't think I would be in the situation. I'm going to try to obviously use it to my advantage, but I don't think he's going to succeed, especially because Sarah Atwood was like, oh, you've won. He hasn't won yet. Like John is just dead. He still has to like run for governor. Who knows if he's going to get elected? Yeah, market equities may back him, but who knows what other entities may put up a candidate? Who knows what other entities may have dirt on Jamie that he doesn't know that they have? So he hasn't won anything yet. Like, yeah, John is out of the picture. That's a big one, but don't just kind of, what is it? Don't count your chickens before they're hatched. Don't just claim victory just because John is dead.
Yeah, absolutely. There's still a lot of moving parts that need to be done. And plus, when John was governor, he had a lot of supporters too that wanted that lease that an easement put in place. So even though John's gone, his voters and his supporters are not gone. So and with Jamie, and they show this a little bit too throughout the early part of the season, Jamie being new blood, he's not really loved by the people of Montana, especially in the agricultural world, which plays a big part in the voting process in particular. So even though he wants to be governor, that's something that's on the horizon for him that he wants. He still has a lot of work to do. And then I would think John being dead makes him a martyr. Like people gonna want to rally even harder behind his beliefs and his ideas to keep what he was trying to fight going. I don't think market equities really thought about that. Like the Dutton family is a legendary family in Bozeman in that area, and a lot of voting power is there, and that's why a big part why he became governor, because the old way of living they wanted to hold on to, and that's why they picked John to be their leader and de facto governor. So it's going to be interesting to see if Jamie can even get that support from the people of Montana. I guess we'll see about that. But speaking about Jamie, he has that meeting with market equities, Sarah Atwood and the market equities representative about what's next now. I believe Ellis. I think Ellis is his name. I want to start with this too. Do you think Ellis knows about the hit?
I don't think so. No, I think Sarah hasn't told them because obviously she wants them to maintain deniability, and the less people that know that you helped commit a hit, obviously the better. So I don't think Ellis knows that that's what happened. I think he might think that she's capable of it, of course, but it hasn't been confirmed to him. So he's just better off like ignorance is bliss type of situation, plausible deniability to be like, that happened, that's sad. I don't really care to know what happened. So no, I don't think he knows that it happened or that, it was a hit called on by Jamie and Sarah.
Okay, that makes sense because he was moving like he didn't know, and like Sarah didn't divulge too much about what they did around Ellis. So okay, that makes sense then. So going back to that meeting, Jamie and Ellis are talking, and they talk about what's next for Montana, and the easement is going to be uplifted. I think Jamie mentioned that he wants to talk to the lieutenant governor about reactivating the lease for all the development. But for that to happen, he has to talk to the lieutenant governor to even get that to get that lifted. And I think he said it might be done in a week. But the heavier part is that the harder part is that Dutton's going to fight, right? And Jamie references that the estate, John Dutton's estate, is going to fight, but they don't have the money or the resources to keep that ranch, and while simultaneously fighting against legal in a legal battle with market equities about keeping that ranch and keeping things being built on that ranch, such as airports and hotels and casinos, so on and so forth. Where do you think Jamie, do you think Beth and the rest of the Duttons have a plan put in place to like be able to keep the ranch? I know Beth doesn't want to keep the ranch, but is there hidden money, you think, or what do you think is going to happen, or how they're able to keep this ranch and fight this Fortune 500 company to like stave off what it looks like to be the inevitable?
I don't think they have the resources. I don't think they have a plan, because even when John was still alive, he didn't really have a plan either. And that's when Beth was like, hey, look, 4 Sixes has their own like steak that you can buy online. You can buy their cuts of beef. You need to be doing this, Dad. You need to like have plans in place to continue to grow. And he didn't have that. And now they are so caught off guard by this that they didn't really have a plan in place. Obviously, you see like Beth's wheels had been turning before he died when she went to Amarillo and was seeing like everything that 4 Sixes has, right? Like they have their own whiskey or vodka or whiskey or whatever it was that she'd ordered. I think she'd ordered a martini. But like Rip could even see her wheels turning of like, maybe she has like some semblances of a plan, but not like anything fully fleshed out, because she didn't expect John to die. So no, they don't have the resources. I don't think they have a plan. Rip and Lloyd were talking about like, we don't know what's going to happen. Casey might be in charge, but other than that, we're just kind of, he even said like it would be smart to even start asking around about like who has jobs open. So no, there's no plan. They're just gonna fly by the seat of their pants, and hopefully it'll work out for them. But like I said, I'm thinking everything's gonna be fucked up for everybody at the end. So I don't know. I'm a pessimist at heart.
Texas Party Head says, I think they're going to partner with Chief Rainwater to help the land intact from the wolves. That's a good point. That's a good point. We didn't get a Rainwater Mo appearance in this episode, but we did in episode 1. They talk about change and fighting back. So that could be a good route to go to help fight the good fights. I want to talk about Tate. I made a prediction last week about what could happen with the land and like the 7 generations of Duttons in that land going back to Native Americans, and how Tate kind of fuses both the Native American bloodline and the Dutton bloodline together, right? Casey has a conversation with Tate about, well, I guess I don't know if you can call it a conversation about John, about what happens with John, but like he kind of asks Tate about what he wants to be. What is his goal in life? How does he view himself? And I think that it alludes to like, I think Casey was trying to figure out like, do I need to fight for this for you? Because like I don't want to fight for this if I'm Casey, only to like not give it to somebody else when it's all said and done. And Tate in so few words said, I'd rather fight for what we got here, talking about the
Right.
cabin that they have, and Tate's a very bright guy, man. I think the more I like adult Tate, like he's been through a lot himself, like getting kidnapped, almost getting killed a couple of times, seeing a lot of violence on that ranch and what John had to do to keep that ranch. And Tate makes a smart comment, which I thought I agree with him. He's like, I don't know if I want to be what Grandpa was. What Grandpa was got him killed,
Yeah.
and it's like, do I want that burden? And it was a good question to have. And Marcy, talk about Tate's journey, man, and where he's at mentally post John Dutton's death, and that conversation that Casey had with him.
Yeah, I mean, he's still a kid. I think he's still processing everything, but in spite of that, he's got a really good head on his shoulders. And I'm glad that Casey asked him that, right? Like, is this something that you even want? Like, yes, like one thing is to like get justice for John, whatever that looks like, right? It might just be figuring out who it was and letting, the courts and like law enforcement handle that, right? So I'm glad that Casey had that much emotional maturity as a dad to be like, okay, just because you are a Dutton and you are now the beneficiary of, John's estate because he's died, that doesn't mean that this is what you need to do. And I think if maybe John had listened to his sons, especially Jamie, when Jamie was like, I don't want to go to Harvard and become a lawyer. I want to work here at the ranch. Might have had like different outcomes altogether for the family, right? If instead of saying like, this is our legacy, so we must protect it at all costs, and this is what you have to do. And like, that's a lot of pressure on any person. So I'm glad that Casey was like, hey, if this isn't what you want, let me know. If it is what you want, like I will fight for it and I will make sure that you'll be able to have it. But if it's not, maybe like I need to cut my losses and like trying to potentially lose everything just to save it for you. And then who's to guarantee that after Tate has it, somebody else isn't going to want to come and take it from them. So, yeah, like Texas Potterhead said, lets Casey know that if he's fighting for justice for John or only if he's fighting for the land too. And I think it's inevitable, right? Like everything's probably going to be developed. So like maybe you're saving it for 10 more years, 20 more years, 50 more years down the line. I mean, don't lose your life over the legacy when your legacy is your son. Like Tate is your legacy. The ranch doesn't have to be your legacy. Your legacy is the ones that you are raising and then leaving behind.
I love that scene because it shows so much growth of Casey as a father.
Yeah.
People forget Casey in the show. Casey and Monica had Tate at 20, so Casey's a young man. He might be in his early 30s now. That Tate's a teenager. So, and I think Casey asking that question too, because earlier on in the series, Casey and John they butted heads, and I feel like John was trying to force this on Casey. That's why Casey left and went to the reservation and with Monica. He wanted to get away from the expectations of like this burden. He felt like it was more of a burden for him than it was an honor, as opposed to Jamie and Lee. It was an honor because that's they wanted to love their affections of their father, and John showed his affections and his love through the ranch and people who were involved in the ranch. And I think Casey seen that and grown, and now he's older and more wiser now. He doesn't want that for Tate. He wants Tate to have the choice of free will, which I think is very, very important. That John Dutton, though we love John, that's what John lacked, was that John was all about honor and responsibility to the family, regardless of how you feel. This is our responsibility. Dating back to 1883 when the shit was founded. This is a part of our bloodline, whether you like it or not. This has to be a utmost top priority. And for Casey, it's like, no, my father's dead because of this responsibility, and I love my son. And if this imminent danger, I want my son to understand that if you want this comes with stuff and terms that you're not gonna be able to run from if you embrace this. And I think him giving dictate the choice really speaks to his maturity as a father, over the span of this series.
If only John's father had had that kind of conversation with him, right? Like
Bars.
maybe John wouldn't have been so burdened in his own life to make it work at all costs. Like how many lives could have been spared of everybody that John had killed because they threatened the ranch, right? Like it would be a whole different world if John Dutton would have been given that freedom that Casey is now trying to give Tate.
Absolutely, absolutely. Marcy, do you have any more other thoughts about this episode?
No, I like this episode better than I liked last week's episode. So I'm hoping to see more rainwater. I think in the teaser we saw like Casey like shaking hands with rainwater. So maybe like Texas Potter had said, like there is going to be some kind of alliance, which I would definitely want to see. I think definitely incorporate more of that into it. Hopefully no more rattlesnakes. But yeah, I'm like excited to see what comes next now that they are pretty sure that it was Jamie. Because the kind of teasers and trailers don't make it seem like it's going to be going all well for Jamie. They show a lot of Jamie crying. So I'm excited to see that. Like, come on, Jamie, stop being a bitch. Like, this is what you get.
Absolutely, absolutely. Speaking of Taylor Sheridan in this Yellowstone world, man, we have another show that we will love to talk about, but we want to get your input too, Watchers universe, about a new show called Landman. It's another Taylor Sheridan creation. It's separate from the Yellowstone universe, but it's also based in Texas as well, in the Permian Basin area of Texas. I watched the show today. I know Marcy watched it yesterday or a few days ago. I love this show. I was 5 minutes in. The opening scene of Landman, and we won't give a large synopsis about it, but we will mention that we talked about it, like give a little nuggets about it. But we want to do a podcast moving forward, and if y'all think so, if you think we should as well, please put it in the chat. Let us know. Add us, ping us, please. Marcy, Landman, Billy Bob Thornton, John Hamm. We know Demi Moore is going to appear sooner or later. What are your thoughts of episode 1 overall?
I liked episode 1. Started off intensely, right? Like any Taylor Sheridan show does. It was very explosive. So without giving too much away, because we might do a pod and we might like go more into depth about episode 1, but Billy Bob Thornton is great in everything pretty much. So this was another opportunity for him to shine, for us to see just kind of like a dramatized version of what happens in the oil and gas industry, what it takes to make that happen, right? Like the hard work of the men on the rigs, but then also like the wheeling and dealing that like men like John Hamm's character, Monty, have to do. So I'm very interested in seeing what happens next. And I'm just kind of bummed that some of the characters that I really started to like don't seem like they will be in the rest of the show without giving too much away. But I was bummed about that ending, but I think it's going to set it up for just kind of a lot more drama to happen throughout the series. So yeah, I really liked it. Watchers, if you want us to, do a pod on it, let us know, because Frank also thought it was really, really great. So yeah, I think this could be another Taylor Sheridan hit.
Yeah, I mean, just from the Billy Bob shit talking, I was like the one-liners, man. There was bars throughout this whole scene from Billy Bob's character. I believe his name is Tommy. In episode 1, I loved it. I think I'm gonna hate John Hamm's character, which I'm totally fine with. He plays like this Don Draper slick oil car salesman type of guy, big business oil guy. I think he's going to be a big time problem moving forward in this series. But I loved it, man. I loved it. I think, like you said, some characters, it appears their demise was met very early in this series. Because I wonder, I'm like, these are pretty well paid actors, man. Like, this is a big payroll. How you gonna be able to pay all these people? But
yeah,
you might not have to moving
Yeah.
forward, but I guess we'll see moving forward after episode 1. But um, yeah, I think Taylor has a hit with this one for sure. If he wants to move forward with this, it looks like it'll be a multi-season type of show. I know Texas Party had mentioned a show called Lioness. I've seen previews about that. I know Zoe Saldana's in that. I think it's in season 2 too. So I'll check that
Mhm.
out as well. Man, Taylor's busy, man. He's a busy
Yeah.
dude for sure. But that's it for episode 10 of season 5 of Yellowstone. Again, thank y'all so much for supporting us. We're a very small pod. We're a proud one. I checked the numbers from last week's episode. We had over 550 views on our last week's episode. So again, thank y'all so much for watching. Continue to watch. Subscribe to our channel. Hit the subscribe button to get all the latest episodes of everything we're covering. Right now, currently, we're covering Yellowstone. Football, watches football on Tuesdays, covering NFL, some college with Tristan and Justin, and possibly Landman as well. And again, if you have any input of shows that you guys love and you guys want to watch and talk about, let us know. I mean, we are a nerdy pod. We love talking about everything and everything. That's what makes this pod so special. Even though there's normally 6 of us, all 6 of us have different interests. That spans across different genres. So yeah, please speak up. Let us know. But like I said before, subscribe to our page on YouTube, Anchor, Spotify as well. Our audio pod is also on Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating. Again, thank y'all so much. And that's it from us, man. For myself, for Marcy, we'll see y'all next Monday.